What if I told you that the people in your life, the ones who trigger you, inspire you, or challenge you, are not just random encounters? What if every interaction, every relationship was an invitation to discover something profound about yourself? In this video, we will dive deep into the concept of the mirror effect, a powerful psychological principle rooted in the teachings of Carl Jung. This is not a mere theory, but a transformative process that allows you to unravel the hidden parts of your soul by reflecting on the people around you. Prepare to explore how your unconscious mind speaks through the interactions you have, and how embracing these reflections can lead to healing growth and ultimately the integration of your true self. What if your triggers, your fears, and your desires are not accidents, but clues that will guide you on a path to self-awareness and freedom? Join me as we uncover the mirror effect and reveal the deep wisdom that lies within your everyday encounters. The people in your life are not just people. They are mirrors, each one reflecting something you cannot yet see or something you have long tried to forget. This is not metaphor. This is psychic law. You are surrounded by fragments of your own soul scattered across the eyes. You meet the voices that stir you, the gestures that make you ache or recoil. The world is your reflection sharpened through others. Carl Jung knew this truth, that the outer is a map of the inner, that you attract not what you want, but who you are, or more precisely what your unconscious needs to reveal. And so, the friend who frustrates you may carry the very trait you repress. The stranger who moves you may embody a future you are afraid to claim. The one who triggers you is often the one who wakes the part of you you've denied. There is no such thing as a neutral encounter. Every person is a message-coded, complex archetypal. Each one asking you not, who are they, but what do they show you about yourself? Most will never ask that question, because it breaks the illusion. It demands inner responsibility. It calls you out of the comfort of judgment and into the discomfort of reflection. But this is where your freedom lives. Because the mirror effect is not punishment, it is initiation. When you meet someone who unsettles you, pause not to analyze them, but to ask, why does this hurt? What in me have they just awakened when you meet someone who inspires you? Pause, not to idolize them, but to ask, what part of me is ready to rise? This is not a game of blame. This is a path of reclamation. Your soul is always guiding you home, but it does so through reflection, not through logic, dream symbols, people. These are the languages of the unconscious, and if you ignore them, if you dismiss them as coincidence or chemistry, you lose the invitation to see the unseen. Jung taught that what you do not bring into consciousness will appear in your life as fate. This is the power of the mirror. It gives you the chance to interrupt fate, to see the pattern and break it, to see the projection and reclaim it, to see the truth and finally live it. But to do that, you must be willing to see clearly, to drop the story, to surrender the ego's need to be right, safe, separate. Because the ego is a wall, but the mirror breaks the wall. It shows you your shadow, not to shame you, but to integrate you. It shows you your light, not to inflate you, but to awaken you. When you fall in love with someone you barely know, ask yourself, what dream do they carry for me? What part of my own beauty have I buried so deeply I could only see it reflected in their gaze? When you hate someone with irrational intensity, ask yourself, what trait of theirs have I rejected in myself? What fear are they pressing like a bruise I pretend doesn't exist? Every reaction is a revelation. The mirror effect is how the unconscious speaks, not to punish you, to return you, to wholeness, to honesty, to the parts of you you forgot disowned or feared, because everything you need to heal is already here encoded in the people who cross your path, the overbearing parent, the dismissive partner, the distant friend, the manipulative boss. They are not obstacles. They are invitations, not to fix them, but to feel you, to feel the unmet need, to feel the hidden grief, to feel the anger that reveals your boundary, to feel the yearning that reveals your calling. This is the deeper truth of the mirror. It does not reflect your mask. It reflects your soul. And your soul does not care about being liked. It cares about being known. So it will bring you those who trigger you, not to hurt you, but to free you from your unconscious prison. It will bring you those who ignite you, not to save you, but to mirror your buried potential. Your task is not to chase them. Your task is to meet the message. What are they showing you that you're still afraid to own? What are they offering that you still feel you don't deserve? This is not always gentle work. Sometimes the mirror cuts before it heals. Sometimes it shatters the image you had of yourself, the image you worked so hard to protect. But what breaks is not your truth. What breaks is your illusion. And in the fragments, something deeper is revealed. The self, the one who holds it all, the shadow and the light, the victim and the creator, the lost and the found. And as you begin to integrate this reflection, you move through life differently. You stop taking everything personally. You stop projecting your power onto others. You stop confusing chemistry with destiny. You learn to see the wound before the behavior, to see the mirror before the mask, to see the soul behind the script, and in doing so, you become what the world truly needs, not more judgment, not more advice, but a mirror, a clear, conscious, compassionate mirror, the kind that reflects not who someone pretends to be, but who they truly are beneath the fear. Because that is the medicine to be seen. Truly holy without distortion, and that begins with you. See yourself clearly, feel what others awaken in you. Not to react, but to remember, you are not here to win the game of appearances. You are here to reclaim what is real. And sometimes, the clearest truth will come. Not from within, but from the eyes of another who was never here to stay. Only to reflect what your soul has always known. Becoming the observer. Why stillness is the path to power. There is a moment rare and holy when you stop reacting. Not because you no longer feel, but because you have begun to observe. This is not numbness, it is awakening. For the first time, the storm does not sweep you away. The thought does not possess you. The emotion does not hijack your breath. You feel it all, but you are no longer inside it. You are watching. And in that moment, something ancient stirs. The observer awakens. Carl Jung understood this space, the place between stimulus and response, between instinct and action. It is not passivity. It is presence. It is the power to witness your own psyche without collapsing into it. Because most people do not think. They are thought. They do not feel. They are feeling. They are puppets of their own, unconscious reacting, defending, projecting, all while believing they are in control. But control without awareness is an illusion. To become the observer is to begin dissolving that illusion. It is to step outside the theater of your personality and into the stillness behind the play. It is to become the one who sees without the need to be seen. And this stillness, this sacred detachment, is not escape, it is mastery. Because when you can witness your fear without obeying it, your rage without enacting it, your craving without collapsing into it. You are no longer a servant to your shadow. You are its steward. This is the first alchemy. Not to destroy the darkness, but to hold it in the light of your attention. Until it reveals its message, the shadow does not need to be fought. It needs to be seen. And only the observer can see clearly. But to reach this state, you must endure a crucifixion of the ego. Because the ego thrives on reaction, on proving, on defending, on being right, on being heard. It thrives on the illusion of control. But when you observe, truly observe, the ego begins to unravel. Its urgency fades, its defenses weaken, its stories dissolve like mist in morning light. And beneath it, something timeless emerges, the self. The self is not reactive. The self does not rush. The self does not shout. The self witnesses, waits, weighs. And when it moves with power. Not because it seeks to dominate, but because it no longer seeks approval. Stillness is not the absence of motion. Stillness is the presence of depth. It is the ground of your being. It is where your intuition lives, where your truth whispers, where your soul breathes. But to hear it, you must be still. Still enough to feel the tension before it becomes reaction. Still enough to feel the story rising before it becomes belief. Still enough to feel the wound before it becomes a weapon. This is where power lives, not in noise but in awareness, because when you are still, you can see. And when you can see, you can choose to not engage, to not defend, to not repeat the cycle. You can break the trance. You can step off the stage. You can respond from soul, not from scar. This is what it means to be free. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. It is knowing what you are doing and why. It is consciousness. The observer is the seat of that consciousness. It is the eye within that never closes, the flame that does not flicker in the wind, the part of you untouched by story, identity, or circumstance. You have felt it before. In moments of deep silence, in grief that stripped you bare, in beauty that made you forget your name. You were not thinking. You were not reaching. You were simply there. And that is the space where transformation begins. Not through effort, through awareness. Jung knew that the unconscious becomes dangerous only when it is denied. But when it is observed, it becomes dialogue. It becomes integration. It becomes wisdom. To become the observer is to enter that dialogue, to sit with the chaos and listen for the signal, to feel the ache and hear the instruction beneath it. And in that listening, your life begins to change. Not because the world changes, but because your center holds. You are no longer pulled by every tide. You are no longer baited by every trigger. You are no longer defined by every voice. You have found the still point within, and from that point, you live differently, you speak with purpose, you move with presence, you choose with clarity, because you are no longer reacting, you are remembering who you are. Beneath the noise, what you carry beneath the mask, where your power truly lives, in stillness, in silence, in the sacred presence of the observer. Not to watch from a distance, but to act from a depth, because when you live from this depth, you become unshakable. Not because life becomes easier, but because you are no longer bound by its illusions. You have become sovereign, not over others, but over your own soul. When you stop reacting, you start reclaiming your soul. There comes a moment, often in silence, often after heartbreak, when something inside you whispers, stop. Stop explaining, stop defending, stop reaching, stop reacting. Not because you don't care, but because you've started to remember. Remember who you were before the world taught you to flinch at every disapproving gaze. before your soul was hijacked by the need to be right, liked, or understood. Before your energy was drained by every emotional emergency that was never yours to fix. This is not apathy, this is reclamation. You are not withdrawing. You are returning because every time you react without reflection, a piece of you scatters into the world. A piece of your soul leaps into someone else's drama, someone else's story, someone else's projection. And if you do it long enough, you begin to forget what your own voice even sounds like. You become a puppet of stimulus, an actor in scripts written by other people's wounds. This is how the soul is lost, not in one grand moment of betrayal, but in thousands of tiny moments of reaction. The snide comment that pulls you into defensiveness, the passive-aggressive silence that forces you to explain, the manipulation dressed as concern, the praise that hooks your ego, each one a thread pulling you outward, each one a distraction from your center. And the more you react, the more you forget. Forget your boundaries, forget your values, forget your essence. You become what they need you to be, what they expect you to be, what they fear you might become. But your soul is not a reaction, it is a return to silence, to sovereignty. To the still vast presence beneath the noise, Carl Jung said, "That which we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate." And nothing reveals the unconscious faster than the places where we lose ourselves, the triggers, the patterns, the cycles we keep calling normal. But what if your next reaction is the door? The door to yourself, not the self that performs, not the self that apologizes for its existence, but the self that watches, that breathes, that knows, the self that remembers that your energy is not for sale, that your silence is not weakness, that your presence is not a product, the self that doesn't need to react because it has nothing to prove. To live from this self is to reclaim your psychic energy piece by piece, to pause before the reply, to breathe before the defense, to witness the pattern before becoming it. This is not detachment, this is power. True power is not dominance, it is direction. And direction requires that you stop being pulled by every external magnet of drama, guilt, praise, and fear. Because every time you are triggered, you are being shown a place inside you, still ruled by the past. Every reaction is an echo, a memory wrapped in urgency. But beneath that urgency is an opportunity to stay with yourself, to stay present, not performative. Can you hold the discomfort? Can you feel the heat without throwing the fire? Can you remain still long enough to hear what your soul is actually saying beneath the noise, beneath the narrative, beneath the compulsion to win or escape? This is the alchemy of stillness. It turns reactivity into revelation. It transforms the unconscious into awareness. It rewrites fate into freedom. You begin to see the game before you play it. You begin to hear the lie before you speak it. You begin to feel the truth before you silence it. And the soul returns. Not in a flash, but in quiet waves. You feel yourself re-enter your body. You notice the beauty you used to walk past. You hear the sound of your own breath and realize it has always carried you. This is not about becoming untouchable. It is about becoming undefended. When you stop reacting, you begin to respond from depth, not reflex. You choose your silence. You choose your speech. You choose your presence. And choice, true, conscious choice, is the language of the soul. You no longer leak yourself, trying to correct misunderstandings. You no longer chase closure from those who were never open. You no longer argue with projections. You let it fall. You let it pass. You let it die, because something deeper is being born. A life not built on reaction, but on intention. A voice not raised in defense, but lowered in truth. a soul not fragmented by every external storm, but anchored in the eternal. And the world shifts. Not because you shouted louder, but because you remembered who you are when you stop reacting and start returning. You remember that peace is not something you find. It's what remains when you stop feeding the noise. And in that stillness, you are finally home. How to stop being an emotional puppet. Cut the strings, reclaim the self. Somewhere along the way, without even knowing it, you gave someone else the strings to your mood, the strings to your worth, the strings to your truth, not because you were weak, but because you were taught to equate love with obedience, safety, with agreement, value, with performance. And so you reacted to avoid rejection, to chase approval, to feel seen, even for a moment. You bent your energy around someone else's storm. You made their silence, your anxiety, their chaos, your responsibility, their disapproval, your guilt. This is how we become emotional puppets. Pulled by praise, tugged by tension, jerked into shame. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." To awaken is to realize that these strings, this invisible choreography of emotional reaction, was never your truth. It was a survival pattern, a defense, a mask worn for so long it felt like skin. But here's the secret. No one told you the puppet isn't broken, it's bound, and the string, they're made of energy, your energy. Each one tied to a place where you've forgotten your power. Each one fastened to a wound you haven't yet named. Each one a fragment of the self. If you've scattered into the hands of those who were never meant to hold it, you were not born to react to the world. You were born to respond from your center. But you cannot respond when you are tangled in the strings. You cannot hear your intuition over the noise of emotional reactivity. You cannot follow your path when you're being pulled down someone else's timeline. So how do you cut the strings? Not with rage, not with withdrawal, not with cold detachment, but with awareness. To cut the strings, you must see them. You must observe the way your body contracts when someone disapproves, the way your voice shifts when you're seeking validation, the way your yes is shaped by fear, not truth. You must look at these patterns not as flaws, but as maps to the places you've abandoned yourself. Every string leads back to a belief that you are only worthy when needed, that love must be earned, that boundaries are dangerous, that your truth is too much. These beliefs were never yours. They were inherited, absorbed, imprinted, but they are not your essence. Your essence is sovereign. Your soul was never meant to be domesticated by external approval. To reclaim the self is to retrieve your energy from every emotional hook that has defined you. This is the real shadow work, not just facing what you've suppressed, but unraveling what you've surrendered. To the parent whose love was conditional, to the partner whose love was performance, to the society whose love was obedience. You don't need to hate them. You don't need to punish them. You only need to see clearly. And seeing clearly breaks the spell because every emotional puppet lives inside a story. A story that says, "I am only safe when others are pleased." But that story is not truth. That story is the cage. You are not here to be agreeable. You are here to be whole. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means integrity. The inner alignment between what you feel, what you know, and what you express. When you begin to live from that place, something miraculous happens. The strings dissolve. Not because others change, but because your center becomes stronger than their pull. You stop answering every provocation. You stop chasing every unsent message. You stop performing the role of the emotional caretaker. Instead, you choose. You choose silence. You choose distance. You choose truth. You choose yourself. And in choosing yourself, you are not abandoning anyone. You are refusing to abandon your soul. Carl Jung taught that individuation is the process of becoming the self. And becoming the self means letting go of who you had to be in order to survive. It means grieving the puppet, the pleaser, the performer, and honoring the one underneath the one who remembers how it feels to breathe without bracing, remembers how it feels to speak without flinching, remembers how it feels to love without losing yourself. That version of you was never gone, only hidden, waiting behind the strings, waiting beneath the noise, waiting for you to pause long enough to hear your own voice again. So pause, not to escape, but to return. And as you return, watch how the world responds. Some will resist, because they only knew how to pull the puppet. Others will retreat, because they never learned how to relate to your truth. Let them go. Let them shift. Let them reveal their own strings. Because your work is not to manage them. Your work is to reclaim you. And you without strings are something sacred, not because you are untouchable, but because you are rooted. Rooted in self, rooted in soul, rooted in the quiet, undeniable knowing that you do not need to be pulled to be powerful, that your peace is your compass, that your stillness is your strength. And that freedom, real freedom, begins the moment you stop dancing for someone else's applause and start walking in your own rhythm. Silence is a shield. Why the world fears your inner stillness. There is a kind of silence in the world cannot understand. A silence that is not emptiness, but presence. Not avoidance, but power. It is the stillness that comes when you no longer need to explain yourself, when you've stopped negotiating your truth for comfort, when you've withdrawn not to disappear, but to remember. The world calls it distance. But in truth, it is a return. Because when you become still, truly still, the illusions around you begin to break. The noise of performance fades. The masks others wear fall off. And in that silence, what's real remains, and what was false crumbles. Carl Jung wrote that, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." But awakening is not loud. It is not a scream of triumph. It is a quiet unfolding, the shedding of 1,000 false selves, a death in slow motion, a rebirth without witnesses. And this unfolding does not happen in the crowd. It happens in the cave. Stillness is the cave where your soul begins to echo again, where the forgotten parts of you return like shadows made flesh, where the wounds speak not to harm, but to guide. The world fears this kind of silence, not because it is dangerous, but because it is sovereign, because it cannot be controlled, because it cannot be manipulated with guilt, with praise, with threat, or shame. This is the silence of someone who has gone beneath the noise. And there is nothing more terrifying to a world built on reaction. When you stop reacting, the game ends. When you stop explaining, the mask slips. When you stop answering every pull, you become untouchable. This is not cruelty, this is clarity. Stillness becomes a shield, not because it resists the world, but because it reveals it. It reflects the unconscious of those around you. Your silence becomes a mirror, and mirrors are dangerous to those not ready to see. They will say you've changed. They will say you're cold. They will say you've lost your spark. But what they're really saying is, you are no longer predictable. You are no longer programmable. You are no longer feeding the roles they cast you in. You've stepped off their stage. You've stepped out of the performance. And now, they must face what your silence reflects: their need for control, their addiction to noise, their discomfort with depth. Most cannot bear it. They will push. They will provoke. They will try to make you react. Because your stillness disarms them. It denies them the script. It forces them to meet themselves, and they are not ready. But you are. You did not come here to be understood by those who only know how to read personas. You came here to become whole, to make the darkness conscious, to integrate the fragments, to rise not as an image, but as an essence. And that rising requires silence. Not the silence of submission, but the silence of sovereignty, the quiet fire of someone who no longer needs the world to mirror their worth. This silence is your initiation, the first step into the underworld of your psyche, where the anima and animus stir, where the child you abandoned still waits, where the archetypes begin to whisper, the wise one, the rebel, the magician, the warrior. They do not speak over the noise, they wait for stillness. And only when the mind quiets, when the outer world fades, do their voices return. This is why silence is feared, because in silence you meet yourself. And the self is not always gentle. The self does not flatter. The self does not perform. The self does not tolerate the illusions you built to survive. It will tear them down. It will show you the places you betrayed your truth. It will bring up the shadow you've hidden beneath your smile. And still, it is love. Because only in that confrontation can you become whole. Stillness is the doorway to individuation, to becoming who you were before the masks, to reclaiming what you buried to be accepted, to remembering that the voice of the soul is not a roar. It is a whisper beneath the world's shouting. But to hear it, you must go still, and that stillness will cost you. It will cost you the relationships built on roles. It will cost you the safety of being understood. It will cost you the comfort of being predictable. But what you gain is real. You gain your intuition. You gain your boundaries. You gain your time, your energy, your depth. You gain the self not as an idea, but as a living truth. And once you've tasted that truth, you can no longer pretend. You can no longer say yes when your soul screams no. You can no longer nod along to stories that erase you. You can no longer be available to everything and everyone. You are no longer a responder. You are a creator. Creating from stillness, creating from essence, creating from the source that cannot be seen, only felt. And the world will feel it. They will feel the difference between presence and performance. They will feel the weight of your no. They will feel the radiance of your silence. Because true stillness is not absence. It is power concentrated. It is energy distilled. It is the soul returning to its throne. And when you sit in that throne, not above others, but within yourself, you no longer need the noise. You no longer fear the silence because you have become it. And silence, when born of consciousness, does not shrink you. It shields you from the chaos of the world, from the projections of others, from the old story that says you must always be available, agreeable, explainable. You owe no explanation for your evolution. Let the silence speak it for you. Let your stillness become the boundary. Let your presence become the message. Because when you stop reacting, when you stop filling the gaps with noise, when you stop apologizing for your stillness, you become what the world secretly longs for, something unshakable. And the unshakable do not shout. They do not perform. They do not chase. They become quiet. And in that quiet, they become undeniable. The self beyond the persona. Letting go of who you had to be there comes a moment quiet, but undeniable when the mask begins to crack. Not because it was torn away by the hands of another, but because something deeper inside you stopped pretending. Something in you grew tired of rehearsing, tired of adjusting, performing, fitting in. The smile began to feel heavy. The conversations hollow, the approval meaningless. And beneath it all, a whisper, faint, persistent, unrelenting, began to rise. This is not who you are. Carl Jung called it the persona, the social mask we wear to function in the world, a necessary fiction crafted not to deceive but to survive. We build it in childhood when we learn which parts of us are rewarded and which are punished. We shape it through adolescence, conforming to the expectations of our culture, our family, our tribe. We perfect it in adulthood until the mask no longer feels like a mask. It feels like identity. But it is not. It is armor. It is strategy. It is the self you had to become in order to be safe, accepted, loved. And now it is the self that keeps you from being free. Freedom begins where the persona ends. But letting go of who you had to be is no small act. It is a death, a psychic shedding, a crumbling of the scaffolding you built to protect your most vulnerable truths. You begin to realize that so much of your life was shaped not by desire, but by fear, not by calling, but by compliance. And the persona, once a shield, becomes a prison. You feel it in the conversations you no longer want to have, the roles you no longer want to play, the spaces that drain you because they do not know the real you, only the version you crafted for survival. But the true self does not live within the performance. It lives in the silence that comes when the performance ends. When you stop trying to be liked, when you stop trying to be good, when you stop trying entirely. And in that sacred stillness, the self begins to rise. Not as a polished ideal, but as something wild, something raw. Something that does not seek to impress, but only to be. The self is not here to be approved of. The self is here to be known. But it cannot be known through roles. It cannot be found in the lines you've memorized to keep the peace. It emerges only when you are willing to let the persona fall. When you stop answering to the identity others have built around you and start listening to the truth that has been buried underneath. This is the beginning of individuation, the journey back to your essence. The confrontation with the unconscious, the integration of the shadow, the alchemy of the soul. It is not clean, it is not linear, it is not comfortable. It is the descent into the underworld, the meeting of the abandoned child, the re-embodiment of the voice you silenced to survive. And yet, it is the only path that leads to wholeness, because until you confront the persona, you are not living. You are maintaining. You are curating your image. You are negotiating your authenticity. You are speaking through filters, loving through conditions, existing through the eyes of others. But there is a cost. And that cost is yourself. You cannot be whole while remaining hidden. You cannot be free while managing perception. And you cannot become who you are meant to be while clinging to who you had to be. There is grief in letting go, grief for the version of you that worked so hard to be loved. Grief for the roles you played so well, for the safety they brought, for the relationships they helped preserve. But there is also liberation, and the kind of liberation that can only be felt when you finally exhale after holding your breath for years. To let go of the persona is not to abandon your life. It is to finally step into it, to speak without performing, to love without losing yourself, to be alone without feeling incomplete, to live from a center that does not shift with every gaze, every opinion, every expectation. And that center that self is not built, but remembered. It was never gone, only buried. Buried beneath the shoulds and musts and polite smiles, buried beneath the childhood wounds and cultural scripts and silent compromises. But now you are ready to dig, ready to go beneath the mask, ready to face the shadows, ready to feel what you have spent a lifetime avoiding. Because only by feeling it, the rage, the grief, the fear, the longing, can you reclaim it. Only by owning your darkness can you embody your light. Only by becoming whole can you become real, and when you do, when you begin to live from the self, something shifts, not in the world, in you. You no longer need to be everything for everyone. You no longer collapse in the face of misunderstanding. You no longer barter your soul for scraps of belonging. You belong to yourself. Fully, fiercely, finely, and the world, sensing this, will respond. Some will leave because they only knew the mask. Others will rise because they were waiting for your truth. But none of that matters as much as this: you have come home. To your voice, to your path, to yourself. And there is no mask in the world worth losing that you are not your wounds. Breaking the cycle of psychological inheritance. There is a pain within you that is older than your voice. A grief that does not begin with your story. A fear that was born before you ever had the words to name it. And yet, it lives in you, in your choices, in your silence, in your dreams. It is not just yours, it was passed down, carried embedded, not as a curse, but as a question: will you continue this, or will you end it? Carl Jung wrote that nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on a child than the unlived life of the parent. The unlived life, the shame unspoken, the rage denied, the dreams abandoned, the love withheld. It moves silently through generations like an invisible script, shaping the way we love, and the way we hide, the way we break. You did not choose the wounds, but now they live in you. And the question is not whether it's fair. The question is whether you will face them. To break the cycle is to become conscious. It is to realize that what you call your personality may actually be protection, that your triggers may be maps to ancestral trauma, that your coping mechanisms may be relics of survival passed down through blood and silence. You were trained, even if no one meant to train you, trained to repress what others couldn't hold, trained to carry what others refused to feel, trained to smile when you wanted to scream. But the body remembers, the psyche remembers, and what is not transformed is transmitted. You are not just healing for yourself, you are becoming the rupture in the pattern. You are becoming the first one to say, "This ends with me." And that work is brutal because you must feel what generations refuse to feel. You must grieve what no one spoke of. You must name the unspeakable, not to drown in it, but to metabolize it, to make it conscious, to bring it out of the shadow and into the light, where it can finally die and be reborn as something else. Strength, compassion, wisdom, clarity. You are not your wounds, but you are responsible for what you do with them. They are not your fault, but they are now your material. And within that material, within the ache, the anger, the numbness, is your potential for alchemy. The wound is not just a scar. It is an initiation, a call into the underworld of your soul, where the myths live, where the archetypes stir, where the broken child meets the inner sage, the lost wanderer meets the inner warrior. The fragmented heart begins to beat in rhythm with the self. This is the hero's journey, not to slay the dragon, but to understand that the dragon was your shadow all along. The parts of you were told to exile. The emotions you were told to suppress. The truths you were told to bury. And now they are clawing at the door, not to destroy you, but to be reintegrated. Healing is not becoming someone new. It is remembering who you were before you had to forget, before you internalized the shame, before you wrapped your worth around your achievements, before you confused being needed with being loved. You do not heal by erasing the past. You heal by facing it, by walking back through the corridors of your psyche with the light of awareness, by holding the child you abandoned, by confronting the roles you adopted to survive, by letting the emotions finally have their voice. Rage, grief, fear, loneliness. They are not weaknesses. They are wisdom waiting to be felt. And every time you allow them to speak, you reclaim energy, you cut the cord to the past, you sever the ties to the psychic inheritance that told you to be small, to be silent, to be safe. Safety is not the same as wholeness, and comfort is not the same as freedom. Real freedom begins when you stop apologizing for your depth, when you stop organizing your life around not triggering others, when you stop defining yourself by the pain that was handed to you. You may have been born into a story, but you are not that story. You are the storyteller now. And storytellers don't just inherit, they create. To create a new narrative is to become the self, the part of you untouched by trauma, by conditioning, by history. The self is deeper than the wound. It is the wholeness beneath the fracture, the seed beneath the rubble. And when you begin to live from that place, you change the inheritance. You become the ancestor. Someone else will thank you. Become the myth breaker, the dream rebuilder, the cycle ender. But you must go first. You must descend. You must stop running from what lives inside you. Because it is not here to haunt you. It is here to be healed. You are not your wounds, but you are your healer. And healing is not a return to innocence. It is a rise into sovereignty. Not clean, not easy, not linear, but holy. Because every time you face what was meant to break you and choose not to pass it on, you become the one your lineage was waiting for. And that is where the real transformation begins. The hidden power of emotional withdrawal. How distance reveals truth. There comes a point when the noise becomes unbearable. Not because it grows louder, but because you finally realize how long you've been pretending not to hear it. The endless justifications, the subtle manipulations, the invisible contracts where your peace was traded for someone else's comfort. And then something ancient stirs, a refusal, quiet but firm. You stop reacting, you stop engaging, you stop being pulled, and the world calls it withdrawal. But in truth, it is return. Return to the self, to silence, to clarity, to the unspoken space where the truth has always waited. Carl Jung understood this as the movement inward, the sacred turning away from the noise of the world. Not out of fear, but out of reverence for the inner life. He knew that sometimes the most radical act of power is to retreat, not as an escape, but as a revelation. Because what you see from a distance, you could never see up close. The roles, the expectations, the psychic contracts that kept you bound. All of it becomes visible only when you stop participating. Emotional withdrawal is not weakness. It is a purification, a severing of the threads that keep you entangled in the dramas you did not consent to. It is the refusal to be baited by chaos, to be defined by reaction, to be used as a mirror for someone else's shadow. In that silence, something becomes clear. Most people do not love you. They love their version of you, the you that reflects what they need. The you that stays within the lines, the you that never threatens their illusion of control. When you withdraw, when you stop performing, they no longer know what to do with you. And that confusion is where the truth reveals itself, because the ones who love your compliance will resent your clarity. The ones who relied on your emotional labor will accuse your silence. The ones who thrived on your reactivity will call your stillness cruelty. But this is not about them. This is about the sacred act of choosing yourself. Emotional withdrawal is not the abandonment of others. It is the ending of your own abandonment. You leave the room to return to your center. You go quiet to hear your soul again. You create distance, not to punish, but to remember. Because memory lives in silence. And in that silence, you remember who you were. Before you were trained to react, before you mistook over-explaining for connection, before you confused availability with worth. This is the mythic journey inward. The hero descending into the underworld, not to conquer, but to commune, to listen, to reclaim. And what you reclaim in that darkness is the truth. That reaction is not relationship. That being needed is not the same as being valued. That sometimes the only way to be seen is to disappear from the stage. Distance becomes the mirror. It shows you who was watching and who was merely using. It shows you what was mutual and what was manipulation. And it shows you, most of all, how deeply you've betrayed your own peace in the name of keeping others comfortable. Jung taught that the unconscious is not merely the repressed. It is the unknown and the unseen patterns that shape our lives until we bring them into awareness. Emotional withdrawal is how you begin to see. When you stop reacting, the patterns surface. The projections reveal themselves. The roles you were cast in lose their grip. And what remains is the raw, often uncomfortable truth. You were never here to be a savior. You were never here to be understood by everyone. You were never meant to be emotionally accessible to anyone who demanded it. You are here to be whole, and wholeness requires boundaries. Sacred, non-negotiable boundaries, born not of resentment, but of self-respect. Distance teaches you who crosses those boundaries. It teaches you who listens when you stop speaking, who sees you when you are no longer useful, who stays when you are no longer performing. This is not cynicism, it is clarity. And clarity is the foundation of liberation. Because when you withdraw, you stop leaking energy, you stop leaking time. Identity soul. You gather what has been scattered. You reclaim what has been lost. You become heavy with presence. The kind of presence that does not chase, does not explain, does not bend. It simply is. And from that presence, something beautiful begins to happen. You stop needing the validation of the very people who drained you. You stop negotiating your worth in conversations that could never honor it. You stop participating in dynamics that only exist because you kept showing up for them. This is not abandonment. This is alignment. You are aligning with the self, the deeper, wiser self that does not need the world's permission to exist. The self that understands that silence is a language, that withdrawal is a boundary, that distance is not coldness, but clarity made visible. Let them call it withdrawal. Let them call it isolation. Let them name it whatever they need to make sense of your absence. You are not here to be understood. You are here to be free. And freedom begins with a refusal to betray yourself one more time in the name of being liked, needed, chosen, or understood. You are not required to bleed for connection. You are not obligated to stay where your soul is shrinking. You are allowed to walk away, not with anger, but with reverence. Not in bitterness, but in truth, because distance does not always mean disconnection. Sometimes it is how you finally reconnect with yourself. And that reconnection, that returning to your own breath, your own rhythm, your own knowing, is the beginning of everything. True. When the world no longer dictates your presence. When others no longer determine your worth. When reaction no longer defines your identity, you become the truth that silence reveals. Unapologetic, unmoved, and unmistakably whole. Integration is the real enlightenment. Embracing the light and the dark within. There is a lie buried deep in the modern spiritual search, the illusion that light is the goal and darkness is the obstacle. that awakening is a flight upward, that wholeness is found in transcendence, that to be free means to rise above the shadow. But the truth is older than language and more honest than comfort. The truth is this: you do not become whole by escaping the darkness. You become whole by walking into it with your eyes open. Carl Jung understood this. He said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Enlightenment is not the escape from the shadow. It is its integration. It is the sacred marriage of the opposites within you: the divine and the damaged, the healer and the wound, the saint and the sinner. It is to make a home for every voice inside you. Not just the ones that impress others, but the ones that terrify you. The angry one, the ashamed one, the jealous one, the selfish one, the forgotten one. They do not need to be exiled. They need to be integrated, because anything you disown within yourself does not disappear. It grows in the dark. It waits, and it acts often without your awareness. The parts of you reject do not die. They possess you from beneath the surface. They distort your relationships. They twist your choices. They speak in the language of addiction, projection, overreaction, control. They shape your life until you dare to meet them face to face. To integrate the shadow is to reclaim your full self. Not the self you perform, the self you buried. The one behind the masks, beneath the roles, before the shame. That self holds your power, your intuition, your creativity, your instincts, your rawness. The part of you that knows what you want, what you feel, what you fear, what you love, before the world told you who to be. But to reclaim it, you must stop running from what hurts. You must learn to sit with the discomfort, to breathe through the chaos, to listen when the wounded voice inside you says, "I am still here." Healing does not mean becoming someone new. Healing means gathering the exiled parts of yourself into a single flame. It means calling your energy back from every person, every place, every moment where you abandoned it. It means standing in the fire of your own truth, without flinching, without apologizing, without turning away. This is what Jung called individuation. The slow, sacred process of becoming who you are, beneath the persona, beyond the conditioning, underneath the mask. It is not a destination. It is a becoming, a spiral inward and outward, into the unconscious, into the myths, into the archetypes, until you remember yourself not as an image, but as a totality, not perfect, not pure, but whole. And wholeness is not light. Wholeness is light and dark, joy and rage, compassion and boundary, silence and scream. You are not here to be angelic. You are here to be real, to bring consciousness into matter, to make the unconscious conscious, to stop choosing sides within yourself. Because the battle was never between good and bad, it was between truth and denial. The moment you stop denying your darkness, you stop being ruled by it. You begin to act with intention rather than react from trauma. You begin to choose your words, your silence, your presence. Not as a defense, but as an offering. And your life becomes art, not decoration, but expression. This is the secret the world resists, that your shadow holds your medicine, that your anger teaches your boundaries, that your fear protects your intuition, that your sadness deepens your empathy, that your shame points to your buried power. You were never broken, you were fragmented, and now piece by piece, you are coming back together. But integration requires honesty, brutal, beautiful honesty. It requires that you stop pretending, that you stop bypassing, that you stop quoting light while living in darkness. It requires that you face the mirror, the real one, the one that shows you not who you wish to be, but who you are in your rawness, your ache, your beauty, your contradiction. And when you can hold that gaze not with judgment, but with love, you begin to see what the mystics saw, that the self is not light alone. The self is the container of opposites. It is the still point where shadow and soul meet. It is the place where your humanity and divinity are no longer enemies, but allies. And in that place, the war ends, not because you defeated the darkness, but because you realized it was never separate from the light. You were never here to be spotless. You were here to be whole. And wholeness is messy. It is holy. It is everything. And now that you remember this, you can stop running. You can stop dividing. You can stop apologizing for your depth. You can walk back into the world, not with a mask, not with a script, but with presence. And presence is the real enlightenment, not the escape from shadow, but the embrace of it. This is the light that includes the dark. This is the healing that becomes a home. This is the self-awake integrated and finally free. When the mirror breaks, facing the archetypes, you refuse to see. There is a moment on the path of awakening when the mirror no longer flatters, when the image staring back is not curated, not filtered, not polite. It is raw, unmasked, unnerving, and yet unmistakably you. Not the version you crafted for approval, not the identity you inherited or constructed, but something ancient, something eternal, the archetypal self that has been watching from beneath the surface, waiting for you to finally look beyond the reflection. And see, Carl Jung wrote that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. But the darkness is not always monstrous. Sometimes it is disguised as the familiar, the roles we worship, the identities we cling to, the faces we wear so often we forget they were ever masks. And then something breaks an event, a loss, a betrayal, a silence, and suddenly the mirror cracks, the illusion shatters, and you are left face to face with what you've refused to see. This is the threshold of the archetypes, the inner gods and goddesses, the shadow kings and wounded warriors, the neglected children and exiled magicians. They are not fantasies. They are psychic forces encoded in the collective unconscious, written into your dreams, your projections, your instincts. They live in myth because they live in you. You do not escape them by disowning them. You become them by denying them, the tyrant you hate, the victim you pity, the narcissist you blame, the martyr you emulate. All of them are mirrors, all of them are invitations. And the moment you say, "That is not me," you exile another part of yourself into the dark. But the psyche does not forget. What you disown becomes shadow. What you resist becomes fate. And what you judge in others becomes the trap you cannot see. To face the archetypes is to face the story you've been telling without knowing. The hero who cannot rest. The lover who loses themselves. The rebel who burns every bridge. The child who never grew. These are not faults. They are scripts inherited, embedded, rehearsed across lifetimes. And they will run your life until you become conscious of them. The mirror breaks to reveal the stage. And once you see it, you can no longer pretend. You can no longer blame the audience. You can no longer forget that you were playing a part, and that the part was never all of you. Integration begins when the character meets the actor, when the mask falls into the hands of the self. When you say with humility and courage, "Yes, that is me." The jealous one, the controlling one, the insecure one, the one who sabotages, the one who manipulates, the one who hides, and also the one who dreams, the one who heals, the one who knows. This is not an apology, it is an initiation. The path of the soul does not demand purity, it demands presence. The willingness to be fully here, not perfect, but whole. The archetypes are not problems to be solved. They are powers to be embodied. The warrior, when disowned, becomes violence. But when integrated, becomes courage. The lover, when repressed, becomes obsession. But when honored, becomes devotion. The magician, denied, becomes deceit. But awakened, becomes wisdom. The king in shadow becomes tyranny. But in balance becomes order, purpose, and grounded authority. You carry them all. You were never meant to be just one. This is what Jung meant by individuation, not becoming something new, but becoming all of who you are. Not choosing the light over the dark, but learning to hold them both, to live from the center where the self resides. Where the archetypes orbit, not as masters, but as messengers, not as jailers, but as guides. And the deeper you go, the more the stories unravel. The projections dissolve, the enemies vanish. You stop needing villains, you stop needing heroes. You begin to see every person as a mirror, every conflict as a symbol, every loss as a door. This is the breaking of the mirror, not to destroy the image, but to see what was behind it all along, the you that cannot be named. The you that is not an image, not a role, not a mask. The self, vast, ancient, unshakable. And from that place, the world begins to look different. You no longer seek in others what you refuse to give yourself. You no longer worship false idols. You no longer flinch when the shadow appears. You welcome it. You listen. You bow. Because you know what it is now. Not a threat, but a key. Every archetype is a key to a room inside you that has been waiting to be unlocked. And the moment you stop fearing the key, the doors begin to open, and what was hidden begins to heal. You do not lose yourself in this process. You find yourself piece by piece, mask by mask, until all that remains is truth. And truth does not need to be defended. It does not need to be proven. It only needs to be lived. So let the mirror break, let the image fall, let the old story die. What remains is real. And what is real is ready to live. The shadow's gift. Why embracing darkness leads to true freedom. The darkness is not your enemy. It is the space where your truth is waiting to be discovered, and the ground where your soul can finally breathe. For far too long, we have been taught to fear the shadow, to run from it, as if it is a predator lurking in the corners of our existence. But the shadow is not an adversary. It is the unseen part of ourselves, calling us to embrace what we have denied, what we have repressed, what we have feared to face. To walk into the shadow is to walk into the depths of your being, where you will meet the fractured parts of yourself that you have long ago abandoned. But here in this darkened realm, you will find your true freedom, not in escape, but in the acceptance of what has always been. They're waiting patiently to be acknowledged. For years, we have been conditioned to present a version of ourselves to the world, to wear a mask that hides the rawness of our souls. We strive for perfection, we seek validation, and we build our personas like walls to protect us from the vulnerability of being seen. But beneath that persona lies something far more powerful, far more authentic. It is the raw, unrefined essence of who we truly are. It is the self we hide in the shadow, hoping that the world will never catch a glimpse of its true form. We fear what lies beneath the surface, the anger, the grief, the shame, the desires that have been deemed unacceptable. We fear that if we face the darkness within, we will be consumed by it. But what if I told you that the darkness is not here to destroy you? What if I told you that it is the key to your wholeness, the very door that leads to your liberation? To embrace the shadow is not to succumb to its power, but to reclaim it as your own. It is to acknowledge that the parts of yourself you have been running from are not to be feared, but to be integrated. For only when you face what you have rejected can you truly become whole. The shadow is not a force outside of you. It is the part of you that you have disowned. It is the forgotten aspect of your psyche hidden away in the depths of your unconscious. And yet, it is in this darkness that you will find the truth of who you are. To confront the shadow is to confront the hidden, the repressed, the suppressed. It is to look into the mirror of your soul and see the reflection of all that you have denied. And when you do, you will realize that the shadow does not hold power over you. It simply mirrors the power you have given it by running from it. To embark on the journey of confronting the shadow is to undertake the hero's journey. It is to venture into the unknown, to descend into the underworld of your psyche, where you will face your deepest fears and darkest truths. But it is not a journey you must make alone. The unconscious is a vast landscape, filled with symbols, archetypes, and dreams that speak to the deepest corners of your soul. In the darkness, you will meet your guides, the wise old man, the trickster, the anima or animus figures that will help you navigate the terrain of your inner world. These archetypal forces are not separate from you. They are reflections of the energies within you, guiding you toward the self you are meant to become. But the path to wholeness is not without its trials. For the journey of individuation and the process of integrating the unconscious with the conscious requires a confrontation with the parts of ourselves that we have denied. It requires us to face our shadows, to look into the abyss of our own psyche, and to embrace the darkness within. The shadow is not merely a collection of negative traits. It is also the storehouse of our creative potential, our untapped power, and our deepest wisdom. To refuse to face it is to remain stuck in the prison of our own limiting beliefs. But to step into the shadow is to embrace your full humanity, to accept both the light and the dark, the known and the unknown, the conscious and the unconscious. As you walk deeper into the shadows, you will begin to see things that were once hidden from you. You will uncover the hidden wounds that have shaped your behavior, your patterns, your relationships. You will begin to understand the ways in which you have betrayed yourself, the ways in which you have been complicit in your own suffering. But do not despair, for this is the first step in healing. The darkness does not define you. It only reveals the places within you that are ready to be healed. And in this healing, you will find freedom. Not the freedom to escape your pain, but the freedom to be whole, to be fully yourself, without fear, without shame. You see, the shadow is not just the repository of all that is dark and hidden within us. It is also the seat of our deepest potential, the wellspring of creativity and transformation. When we reject the shadow, we reject our own power. But when we embrace it, we unlock the door to the full range of our human experience. We step into the vast ocean of possibility where there are no limits to what we can become. For in the shadow, there is no division between good and bad, right and wrong, light and dark. There is only the integration of opposites, the unity of all that is within us. And so the path toward wholeness is not a path of avoiding the darkness, but of walking straight into it. It is a journey that requires courage for. It asks us to give up the comfort of our illusions, to surrender the false safety of our personas, and to face the truth of who we are. But in doing so, we will discover that the darkness is not something to fear, but something to embrace. For only by embracing the shadow can we discover the true light that lies hidden within us. The light that is not simply a reflection of the world around us, but the light of our own inner wisdom, our own authentic power. And so, as you stand on the threshold of this journey, know that the shadow is not your enemy. It is your ally. It is the mirror that reflects the parts of you that are waiting to be seen, waiting to be integrated, waiting to be embraced. The darkness is not something to escape from. It is something to enter, to explore, to learn from. And as you do, you will find that the more you embrace the darkness, the more the light within you begins to shine. For in the shadow, you will find your true freedom, the freedom to be whole, to be fully yourself, to be everything you were always meant to be. So step forward, walk into the darkness and embrace the shadow. For in doing so, you will find the greatest gift of all, the gift of true freedom.